Hi, Luke Hanson McDonald here. Today's episode is focused on what I think is probably the most innovative family business ever, which is Ferrero. Led by Michele Ferrero for many years, this business created some of the most recognizable candy brands around the world, including Nutella, Ferrero Rocher, Kinder Eggs, Kinder Bueno, Mon Chéri, and Tic Tacs. I find this particularly interesting because my grandmother's favorite candy was Tic Tacs, my favorite candy is Ferrero Rocher, and my daughter absolutely loves Kinder Eggs. My guest today is Luca Cottini. He's a professor, a cultural historian, a YouTuber, and a published author who's written an incredible biography on Michele Ferrero. Today we discuss the origins of this family business. We discuss how narrative storytelling wove itself through many of the products, how Michele built an incredibly unique and innovative culture, as well some of the actual specific stories around how each product came to market and what made it so successful. You're not going to want to miss this one. This is Beyond the Family Business podcast. Let's jump into it. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
So I am from a city an hour north of Milan. I lived in Italy until I was 25. I studied classics in Milan and I taught in a high school. Then at a certain point in my life, I moved to the US and I started a master's program and then a PhD program in Italian studies, where I moved from a traditionally literary background to kind of a profile as a cultural historian. So dealing with Italy, not just from the point of view of literature, but from the point of view, a holistic point of view of literature, design, architecture, photography, cinema. So observing it from the outside and through my academic career as a professor of Italian studies, in my graduate studies, I was at Notre Dame, where I also met my wife, and the story became much longer here in the US. Here I am 20 years later. I did my PhD at Harvard, where my mentor is a Dante scholar who deals with design and works with entrepreneurship. He's the chief visionary officer of a robotics company. So this double profile as an entrepreneur and literary scholar. I taught at McGill, so I had a Canadian experience in Montreal. And 12 years ago, I moved to Pennsylvania, where I direct the Italian Studies program at Villanova University, and I regularly teach classes both in literary studies and in this design, entrepreneurship, and innovation. So at the same time, through this, I started a podcast at the beginning, then a YouTube channel, which is called Italian Innovators, where I presented the contents of my book. It's called The Art of Objects, where I trace the beginning of the Italian culture of design, putting together literary imagination and industrial imagination. And I started writing episodes and profiles of great figures like Michele Ferrero, Campari, Ferruccio Lamborghini. So the men and the people behind the big brands. So this has two components. One, Italian, so explaining the Italian approach to business. And the other one, Innovators, an exploration of what constitutes real innovation and where a good idea is born. So this has been going on for 6 years, and here we are. So
amazing. Well, it's really exciting to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. You're the first cultural historian or any type of historian or professor I've had on the show, so I'm very excited about it. So I guess the first question I would have is, you're an author. You've written a wide variety or about a wide variety of topics. Why did you decide to write a biography about Michele Ferrero?
So if you wanna correct this, Michele, because this is kind of like
Michele?
This is one of those.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I'll ask it again.
It's better to cut it off now. So because the spelling is like an Anglo-Saxon reader would say Michelle. but
Yeah.
Michele,
Michele.
Michele Michael. So want to repeat the
All right.
question?
Sure, absolutely. I'm sure there will be a number of times where I mispronunciate things. I may even keep this part in because it's kind of hilarious. Um, so, you've written about a wide variety of different topics. Why did you decide to write a biography about Michele Ferrero? Hopefully, I got that
Yeah.
right.
So, well, thank you for the question. And the biography starts from an invitation. So, an editor in Italy asked me to write a story about Ferrero after watching the episode I dedicated to him on Italian Innovators. I also did a series of Italian Innovators for the Italian equivalent of the Wall Street Journal, Il Sole 24 Ore, where I published an episode in Italian. So the invitation came as a surprise, but also as something really fit with kind of my profile and the situation. Why? Because Ferrero died in 2015 and he never released any interview. The day after he died, the only interview that he released was published. But it was an interview that he gave like 5 years before to a famous Italian journalist, Mario Calabresi. And the condition for it was to publish it the day after he died. So around Ferrero, there's a lot of secrecy. There's a lot of unknown. And so at that time, the editor, the publisher, contacted me saying, like, why don't you write a story about him? It's very intriguing to know more about this very important figure, especially for Italian culture, but also very mysterious figure. And while I was writing it, there was another kind of biography that came out from a journalist who really did the documentary work of interviewing all the collaborators, all the people who worked with Ferrero, and it's certainly contribution to kind of the historical reading of Ferrero. What I did was, again, starting from a classical mindset, was something similar to what Plutarch, a Greek biographer, did in the ancient time. He was the author of the Parallel Lives, so biographies of great figures of ancient times, so Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great. So what Plutarch did was not to do a biography of the facts that everybody already knew about them, but was an inquiry on when Julius Caesar became Julius Caesar, when Alexander the Great became Alexander the Great. So I did the same with Ferrero, trying to explore the cultural world around him and explore where and when his innovative idea of a business came about, how. So this is also the part of Innovators that I deal with in the podcast and the YouTube show. So there you go.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it's a very interesting perspective or approach to take, and it's very relevant for what I try to do on this channel. So again, very excited to have you on here to talk about it. I was attracted to the story because he wasn't the first generation, yet he was so wildly successful. And as you said, he's well known in Italian culture, but it's somewhat of a crime. He's not that well known over here in North America. And it's just such an incredible story with so many innovations and so many well-known brands that, as I've told other people about this interview ahead of time, they just couldn't believe one person, one company had touched so many incredible products. So I don't want to get ahead of myself because it'll ruin some of the surprise for people. But my next question was, could you just start off with how did the Ferrero business begin?
So it began as kind of bakery enterprise by Pietro Ferrero, the father of Michele. So we're used to thinking of Michele as the founder of Ferrero, but he's actually second generation. So the founder of Ferrero is Pietro. He was a baker from Alba. Alba is a city in the Langhe region, which is now famous for wine and white truffle.
Barolo,
Barolo
is my favorite wine.
And I have an episode on the origins of Barolo wine in Alba. And
okay. I'll have to check that out after
Giulia
this.
Falletti di Barolo, who is also venerable now in the Catholic Church, who's the person behind the development of Barolo. So Alba is a city an hour south of Turin. It's a very industrial city, Turin. So Pietro Ferrero in the 1930s started a bakery in Turin, 1934. It was a failure. After this failure, he decided to join the Italian military in Ethiopia. Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1936. After this invasion, Italy was punished with the embargo. And that is the reason why Mussolini decided to join the Axis with Hitler in 1936. And Pietro Ferrero took the opportunity of the Italian presence in Ethiopia to develop a business, a bakery business, kind of producing panettone. It's like a Christmas cake for Italian soldiers who were in Ethiopia. Didn't go well either. So he got back to Turin in the late 1930s and started another bakery. But in 1940, Italy joined the war. And so the bakery didn't have much success. So that led him and his wife, Piera Cillario, to kind of lead the city, which was kind of being bombed, and go to the countryside, Alba. Alba actually became the center of Italy's resistance movement from 1943 to 1945. So when Italy signed the armistice, the German army was in the peninsula, and for 2 years, 43 to 45, Italy kind of fought a war, global war, but also a civil war between kind of those who were pro-fascist, fighting aside the Germans, and those who were anti-fascist, fighting aside the Allies, so Canadians, Americans, and British. And Alba was the first city that was liberated in the north. Pietro Ferrero was there at that time when the city was really war-torn, and conceived bakery as a service to the people, whether from one side or the other. Now, after the war, Alba was really not just war-torn, but also in a state of dire poverty and crisis. And the only agricultural product that was available was hazelnuts. So the interesting thing about Pietro Ferrero was the attempt to combine this local product, this local ingredient, with the little cocoa that was available. And so over the years of war, he really experimented a solution to mix together hazelnut and very, very limited amounts of cocoa. What is interesting to me is that, like, this explains one of the key elements of Italian innovation, that is the creative approach to the limit. So instead of seeing the limit moralistically, scarcity, poverty, the idea of using limit as a creative resource to think of a solution outside, out of the box. So this is how he created what he called pastone, like a big paste, really, that was mostly solid at that time. So that's the story of Pietro, and certainly.
And was it a spreadable paste, or did you eat it, like pieces of it, or
at the beginning?
What was the product
at the beginning,
like?
This so-called pastone was mostly a solid paste, and this was called gianduiot. Gianduiot is a Turin dialect expression to indicate the carnival mask of Gianduia. It's kind of a mask for children during Carnival. And the idea of putting together hazelnut and cocoa was already present in Turin. It's called Gianduia, again, the chocolate, putting the two things together. Now, where the spread comes from is another example of how a mistake can be observed, like moralistically or creatively. So what happened is that, like, this was kind of the late 40s. During the war, Michele Ferrero, the son, was still studying in high school. After the war, he returned to Alba, and from 45 to 49, he really worked with his father. Pietro died of a heart attack in 49. So we have only 4 years where they are together. In these 4 years, something happens. So in Naples, or like in southern Italy, when they were selling this gianduiot, the chocolate was melting because of the warmer weather. And they heard that some workers didn't want to waste it and kind of spread it on a slice of bread. So instead of, like, withdrawing the product from the market because it's an embarrassing mistake, they caught the opportunity to develop something that at the time was completely unconceivable. We have to say that chocolate until the 19th century was mainly consumed as a liquid product. So liquid chocolate. And the 19th century, we have the movement to transform it into a solid product. The idea of like a spreadable chocolate would be as crazy as to say, well, I'll invent now a spreadable coffee. So this is how the mistake became the open door to experimentation, to something new. And this is how we have the beginning of what then will become Nutella, which has come like a story of its own. So
incredible. So as you said, really took a moment of painful history and turned it into something that could be their strength, which is pretty incredible. So that was the first product, and then his father died suddenly of a heart attack in the late 40s. How did the business survive that? Who was in charge after he passed away? How did they not just collapse after that?
This is quite a story, because this could have been that right from the start. Not only because of the death of Pietro, but also because like the business was founded in 1946, so the year after the end of the war. And in 1948, the Tanaro River, which is the river in Alba, flooded the city, and the factory was completely flooded. Now, Pietro attributed the recovery and the not total destruction of the factory to an intervention of Our Lady of Lourdes. And there's a statue of Our Lady of Lourdes in the factory. And this is at the beginning of Pietro's, of Michele's devotion to Mary, and in particular Our Lady of Lourdes. This will become important later in the development of a product like Ferrero Rocher. And Michele was 25 when he took over the company after his father died. He was born in 25, and his biggest helpers were the uncle, and his name is Giovanni, and you will see the father Pietro and the uncle Giovanni. These are the names of Michele's two sons, Pietro and Giovanni. And the other helper was his mother, Piera Cillario, and she is really an important figure in the development of the company, because like while Pietro was a creative, like a baker, Piera was more of an economist. So she was like the business administrator of the company. And actually in 1962, she became the president of the company. And Michele Ferrero actually opened centers for the workers, both in Italy and then in Germany, the first kind of external factory dedicated to her. They were called Villa Piera, a villa dedicated to the name of his mother. So they were people of great faith, and they were people that connected a lot with the locals. So in Alba, they owned a bakery shop that was owned by the family of Piera Cillario. And in this bakery shop, a lot of customers entered, and Michele observed them in their really needs, like very concrete needs. So the aunt that wanted to buy chocolate for the niece for a good grade, the grandmother who wanted to please the grandchildren for to receive a kiss from them. And this experience is something that Ferrero later transfigured into one business, an aspect of his business philosophy, what he called La Valeria. So Valeria is the name of a fictional woman that he had in mind as not the ideal customer from market analysis, but as the real customer, the one that was entering the bakery shop, whose needs he was intercepting for real. So is one of the secrets of his appeal with people, the ability to communicate directly to the needs of the customer rather than talking putting market analysis first. So this experience and then market analysis rather than market analysis and the going to the market. So this really developed in the 1950s, and Michele until 1956 worked with his uncle Giovanni. His uncle Giovanni died in 56. So that's when 57. He took really the reins of the company and made a pledge in 57 to the company, to all the workers, to serve them. It's kind of similar to the pledge that Queen Elizabeth II did about the same years to the English people. If you read the text, you contain the same idea of work or industrial work as a service to the community. And this is also one of the parts of the elements of Ferrero's success. So,
and his mother was also working in the business throughout the 1950s as well.
Yes, she was organizing also kind of the welcoming of the workers. So every time the workers were coming to the factory, she had already coffee prepared for them and created this company culture that really made Ferrero a particularly interesting place to work at. Then in 2009, it was like voted as the best place to work in the world. So this is part of a company culture that starts from this approach that Piera had from her faith. Her brother, Eugenio Cillario, was a priest, Father Eugenio, and he was a big influence for Michele, who actually at a certain point thought about entering the seminary. And he realized instead that he could do more good by creating this company, which would serve the people, than perhaps by being a priest. So this is also part of the so-called Ferrerita, Ferrero-hood or Ferrero-ness that is the core of the company culture.
Sure, absolutely. And so, Michele takes over in the late 50s. And what is his first success? What's his first product that he focuses on developing?
What is really interesting is that he develops a product for the German market, which is Mon Chéri. It's a chocolate with liquor and a cherry inside. It's very interesting that, like, in 1957, the really early, what we call now European Union, signed a treatise in Rome, establishing what is called the European Economic Community, which is at the root of the European Union. Right before that, Ferrero opened a factory in Germany. And this factory was meant to expand the local market of Alba into a different country. Now, at the time, 1956, opening an Italian factory in Germany was a very, very risky move. Germans did not like Italians because of what had happened during the war. And but for Ferrero, this was a strategic move because, like, chocolate in Northern European countries there was a bigger demand for it, but also could last longer on the shelves because of weather conditions. So what he did was, like, he wanted to launch a product for the German market to flatter Germans into buying Italian chocolate. And so what he did was, like, to transform the idea of chocolate, which at the time was sold in bulk cases, into an individually wrapped piece. And he wanted to flatter the German lady, the German Valeria, with a product that she could receive as a gift of love. So the individually wrapped chocolate was wrapped in red, and it contained a little liquor in it because at the time the heating systems were very low and Germans were very poor. So the liquor could provide kind of a boost of warmth. So he launched this as a campaign in all the railway stations in Germany, providing like a Fiat as a price, Fiat 500 as a price for kind of this contest. And he really won the Germans over with Mon Chéri. So that's the real first success. And Ferrero, in the interview, the only interview, talks about it as his greatest success, so the breakthrough. At that time, he was also working on Nutella. So Nutella is something that happens later, and it's a product like that as a great work of art, a great piece of literature, developed over the course of 20 years. Like Ferrero Pietro starts the Pastone in 1946. It's called Gianduiot. But then at the same time, the product changes. It's called Crema Alba, so cream from Alba. It's also called Super Crema, Super Cream. But while Ferrero is expanding in Europe, again, he's one of the first entrepreneurs who starts to expand in a non-Italian market before the establishment of the European community. And while he's doing that, he's also looking for a better recipe for the pastone, so an ingredient that could allow the chocolate to be spreadable more easily. So
very cool. And so he has this huge success with Mon Chéri in Germany, and then his next big product is Nutella. And can you tell me a bit about, what does that launch look like? Where is Nutella, successful initially, and how does he, what I believe today is still their most popular product, how did that innovation come along?
Well, on the one hand, it comes along from kind of incubation period, so the 1950s. Ferrero was also a baker, so he worked a lot in his lab to create solutions for a more spreadable chocolate. In the 50s, the price of cocoa becomes lower, so the quantity is raised. And at the same time, he also identifies palm oil as the glue, the element that really gives the product consistency. Now, the real birth of Nutella is in 1962, which is the year when his mother, Piera, becomes the president of the company, and the year where he marries Maria Franca Fissolo, who was like a translator working in the company. And this is also interesting because Ferrero plays a lot with different languages. So it's a chocolate as a language, and you'll understand this with Nutella. So in 1962, these two events happen. But also in 1962, the Italian government passes a law that forbids superlatives in food. So the use of extra, the use of super. At the time, Nutella was called Super Crema, Super Cream. So the company starts to arrives at the point where the product is set, is the definitive version of it, but also needs to find a name for it. So between 62 and 64, there is really a process of design of the story of this chocolate. So the name Nutella comes from two pieces: nut, the English component nut, so a product that is already international, so the translating mindset of his wife, and Ella, which is a very recognizable Italian sound from mozzarella, caramella, stella, star, mozzarella, candy. It's also a very kind of easy sounding name that contains the letter N, kind of like childish, fun, and the letter L, la, the storytelling. So in a way, he conceives of Nutella or nut Ella as the speaking nut, the chocolate that you use while spreading and telling stories. This is a way to transcend the product and make the product a speaking object. And the reason why it became so powerful is also the design of the packaging. So the design of the bottle, a flat bottle with an open neck holding the knife, and the design of the minimalistic Nutella character, and the design of the label, which includes like a slice of bread and a knife with a spreadable chocolate, which is kind of like an instruction for use for a concept that is not like immediately obvious. So Nutella is officially established in 1964, and it really became powerful in Europe right away. Not much in the United States until the 2010s. So at the beginning, Nutella was a product for study abroad students who went to Italy and wanted to bring it back to Canada, the United States, as an exotic version of peanut butter. In 2011, Lady Gaga tweeted about like her love for Nutella, and that really launched the fame of Nutella. So Nutella was imported here in the US in 1983. The first real product that broke through the American market was actually Tic Tac, the candy, which made their appearance in Shrek and also in Home Alone. So the ability again to create a product that is a speaking product. So the Nutella, the storytelling product. Ella also contains the rhythm of favela. Favela in Italian is the word for fable, for storytelling. So again, the creator, Pietro, his father, and the strategy, his mother, Piera, put together in the figure of Michele. Great leader, but also great storyteller and creator. This is very rare in a company. So
wow, that's an incredible story, and I have to give you praise for your depth of knowledge on all of the different elements of what made it so successful. It's very fascinating, and the point about language, I don't want to jump ahead again, but I as I'm thinking about their other products, I see how they play with language with each of them. So the point is well taken. Next question was, can you speak about what were some of those other products that came after Nutella? So now, this has been a huge success across Europe. I'm sure it's taken them to a whole other level than Mon Chéri even did. Where did they go, after that?
Well, I might give you three examples of three products that are really famous. One is the Kinder Egg, one is Pocket Coffee, and the other one is Ferrero Rocher. And they all contain this ability to read the situation, read a real need, and transform it, package it into a storytelling platform through chocolate. So while a writer uses ink and paper, you have to conceive chocolate as the matter of storytelling for Ferrero. So he tells stories through it. So, Pocket Coffee is the most obvious one. He was born from William Salice in Italian, who was like one of his collaborators, and he drove a lot in Italian highways at a time at night when the rest areas were closed. So he really needed some boost of energy and caffeine, and that's where kind of tasting coffee in chocolate, Pocket Coffee, became a very simple but viable solution for that. So pocket espresso that you can carry along the way and consume at every time of the day, at every moment of the day.
Does that product still exist?
It's incredibly famous in Italy. Here in North America, a little bit less.
Yeah, interesting. I've never seen that. That's one of the products I'd never seen before. But next time I'm in Italy, I'll definitely have to try it.
Yeah. The Kinder Egg had a hard time entering North America. It's like a small chocolate egg with a surprise inside. This is very popular in Europe.
It is my daughter's. I have a 4-year-old daughter. It's her favorite product. Absolutely. Anytime for her birthday or Halloween or anything, that's her number one request is a Kinder Egg.
Absolutely.
So very familiar.
They had a problem of packaging here because there are laws where you can't insert objects in eatable food. So they really came up with a solution, a packaging solution that is different from what you find in Europe. But the interesting part of it is that, like, in Italy, there's a big tradition at Easter to have like larger chocolate eggs with a surprise inside, which Ferrero wanted to capitalize upon, like it's a seasonal gift. So he decided to create like a mini version of it, and a lot of his collaborators told him, look, this will not work. But one of his famous phrases is, well, from now on, every day will be Easter. So the idea was like to replicate that seasonal Easter joy of the chocolate egg with a surprise on a daily basis. From a strategic point of view, to cover the entire year. From a content point of view, to give the sense that every time you buy a Ferrero chocolate, there is a gift, there is a surprise inside. There is an object, something with something inside. It's not just chocolate, but there is chocolate with something inside. This is a very typical Italian approach to matter, as not its face value or the external facade of something, but matter as in the etymology of matter, from mater, mother, as a generative tool, something that contains something else. As in Nutella, it's not just chocolate, but it's speaking chocolate. The Kinder Egg, it's not just an egg, but it contains a surprise in it. Now, the most blatant example of this is Ferrero Rocher, which is a chocolate that he developed like from 75 to 82. So 7 years in the laboratory to find the solution. This is something that Ferrero did to homage, to pay tribute to Our Lady of Lourdes. So from the flooding and from his faith, and he actually was known for his faith, and all his managers were sent to Lourdes, the Marian sanctuary in France, for kind of bonus trips, like or to bond together. Now, Ferrero Rocher is actually the only chocolate where his name appears, Ferrero. And Rocher is actually the name of Rocher de Massabielle, which is the site where Our Lady appeared in Lourdes. If you look at the chocolate is a chocolate representation of the grotto of Lourdes with the rocky part and the praline. If you break it, there is like a hazelnut and the explosion of flavor, which coincides with the apparition. So you have a chocolate that is now like the most sold chocolate in the world that he wanted to bring to everybody, to create a luxury item that could be for everybody. So this, again, popular sense of the gift as something that appeals to everyone, not just for a separate category, that, however, contains a lot of his own story, a lot of the story of his faith. And this would be also iterated in 94 when the factory would be flooded again. And once again, the first thing he would do would go inside the factory and take the statue of Our Lady of Lourdes to save it. So that's kind of like his own faith that becomes kind of a storytelling platform. And so a chocolate with something inside. And that's one of the secrets of Italian storytelling through business.
Yeah, no, I, you know what? I did not know that about Ferrero Rocher, which is my favorite chocolate. So my daughter loves Kinder Eggs. I love Ferrero Rocher. The one other product I wanted to ask you about was Tic Tacs, because that one seems the most, since it's not chocolate, it's the most unique as far as I can see. And it was my grandmother's favorite candy, so it's also close to my heart. Could you speak a bit about Tic Tacs?
Tic Tac really was formed it was created in 1969. So, and they were called at the beginning refreshing mints. So they were conceived as a product to enter the American market late 1960s. And it was really the breakthrough product for many years before Nutella did. The success of Tic Tac, like for Nutella, comes not just from the product, but from the naming of it. So Tic Tac replicating the sound of the lid that opens.
Yep.
And from the packaging, this incredibly manageable, like a portable package that became kind of like a speaking product, a box that, like with the onomatopoeia, Tic Tac is speaking to you. So once again, the idea of the product that is a storytelling platform. And this is something that you see also in the campaigns that Ferrero launched in the 1950s and 60s through what was called carousel, also narrative advertising on kind of early years of TV. But also with the idea of turning the labels, especially of Nutella and also of Tic Tac, into platforms where different characters from this narrative ads could be placed so that you could collect them. So not just the product, but also the packaging becomes a surface of a narrative that Ferrero establishes with the users. So once the product is consumed, you still conserve the packaging or kind of the glasses of Nutella with different characters to collect. And so that's kind of another item that adds to the value of the product.
Cool. And was Tic Tacs, were those popular largely in North America, or were they also popular across Europe as well?
Both, but this was really the product to expand the market here in North America. And again, the appearances of in Home Alone, Santa is giving a Tic Tac. So and in Shrek, the bad breath of Shrek, Donkey saying like, you need a Tic Tac. So that tells you of the popularity of the product. Once you have these appearances in movies, this is something that tells us that the audience can recognize the reference. And so this gives you a sense of the popularity of it.
For sure. And to your point about collecting the containers, I recall my grandmother would always let us keep her Tic Tac containers when we were kids, and we'd use them with our toys and put stuff in them and stuff like that. So very visceral memory for me. So, okay, you've done a great job of illustrating the sheer amount of innovation that came out of the Ferrero family and business. Could you speak a bit about how did Michele combine his entrepreneurial spirit, the lessons he learned from his family, etc., and the creative vision, whether it's around narrative or product design, to build this incredible business? How did he actually pull all those things together? Because it seems like a truly unique mix of skill sets.
It is, and it is hard to find this in one person, the managerial skill and the creative skill. Another good example for this might be Giorgio Armani in fashion. The ability as a designer combining with the ability as a strategist. So this is a peculiar thing of Michele Ferrero. And I think the storytelling ability and the creative ability with bakery that was nurtured in his lab until he died. He had his own lab where he kind of tested new recipes constantly. So think of him as an artist, as again a fashion designer in the case of Armani. This is combined with the creation of a culture in his company, what he calls Ferrerita, so the Ferrero way of being, which is condensed in his motto, which is lavorare, creare, donare, which means to work, to create, and to give as a gift. So this is a sense that the company is rooted in the discretion of work. There is kind of a secrecy around the company, which is where we started from, which is very particular. So discretion, not just because of the trade secrets, but also the discretion about whatever happens inside the company. It's very hard to actually visit the headquarters of Alba or talk to any of the managers or the CEOs, now his son. Creare, the ability to create products that tell stories, and donare, to give as a gift. So the service component, the idea that the company really treats the workers in a very particular way through the Ferrero village in Alba, serving the retired workers of the company, the Villa Piera, which was established in Germany as a way to assure kind of Italian workers in Germany of kind of a warm environment, and also a culture which is summarized in the book I published on Ferrero by the Decalogue, kind of a list of instructions that he gives to his managers, which include the principle of listening, of not make anyone feel small, to communicate appreciation, to be always human, to never ask for impossible things, to admit mistakes, to distrust those who praise you, and look for the substance instead of criticism. And this phrase that is kind of the last point, where Ferrero says a good boss can make a normal man feel like a giant, and a bad boss can transform a giant in a dwarf. So this is kind of a sense that he has developed of kind of a appreciation and human understanding in dialogue with what is called the Catholic social doctrine. So documents that affirm kind of the idea of entrepreneurship as a service or a good for others, as a way to create wealth that can be shared with others, and position that values of all the subjects that are part of a company. So this is a part of the culture of Ferrero. If I can, I want to kind of explain why this matters, because in the Hollywood version of the Italian family business, we have instead something that cinematographically works very well, and it might be realistic in certain cases, but it's not what Ferrero is about. So if you have watched like The House of Gucci or the movies about Ferrari, the images of the founder or the family business are always marred by the kind of godfather archetype. So the big figure and the petty rivalries, feuds among the family relatives that self-destroy the initiative of the creator. Now, Ferrero is a different case. Ferrero, like Ermenegildo Zegna in the wool sector, is like a 3-generation company, which instead, or Illy Cafe, which instead values family ownership. So it's not in the stocks like Ferrero, as a way to retain property, to retain the authorship of kind of what the work is about, and also encourages 3 values that are super important for a business: loyalty in the workers, trust in the workers, that allows the workers not to give you what is owed, but to give you their best. People who work for Lamborghini work there because they know they can give their they can give their creative side there, and also duration over time. It would be great to have a product that sells constantly over time as an ever fresh product like Nutella. This is the dream of any entrepreneur. So think about like Edison, Thomas Edison, who started in 1876, kind of a first lab to create and think about new ideas, innovative ideas. People accepted to be paid less because they wanted to work for Edison, because this was like a really inspiring and generative place to work. The same with Ferrero. This is why it's been voted like one of the top places to work. So that's kind of part of his culture around the product as a company. Yeah.
No, very interesting and articulate explanation. I mean, it had to be something like that. Obviously, it's not just him; it's the overall culture and getting the most out of your team. I know we're getting tight on time, so I just had 2 more questions. The first was, so Michele has now transitioned the leadership to his son.
Yes.
Correct? Could you speak about how that transition happened and when it took place?
Well, it took place really starting from the 1970s, when Michele Ferrero decided to move from Alba, the headquarters, to Brussels. The reason why he did it was because at the time in the 1970s, the Red Brigades, so an extremist group from the left, started like a strategy of terror. So they're called the Lead Years in the 1970s. There were also from the right, the extreme right, attempts to destabilize Italy. So this strategy on both sides also implied like kidnappings of children of important figures in Italian public life. So the son of Getty, of the Getty Museum of Los Angeles, was actually kidnapped in Rome in 1973. So this gives you a sense of an example of this situation. In 1978, the president of the Italian leading party was kidnapped and killed in Rome. It was a very brutal situation. So for this reason, Michele brings his family to Brussels. And Pietro, the first son, and Giovanni, the second, they were born in 1963 and 1964, grow up in a European setting, in a Belgian school. Pietro has a passion for biology, and he studies biology in Turin. So he takes on kind of the scientific side, so product control, quality control, product management. The other son, Giovanni, actually studies in the US at Lebanon Valley College, which is found in Annville, PA, 7 miles away from Hershey. Not a random location. So Milton Hershey is also a figure of the enlightened entrepreneur who created a city around the chocolate factory and gave a lot of services to his workers. So certainly he is part of the inspirations behind the work of Michele Ferrero and the creation of this Ferrerità. So Giovanni studies marketing and then becomes an author. So Giovanni Ferrero publishes 5 novels. Another weird case of a CEO of a top company, is the wealthiest man in Italy, who is also a narrator. So this takes from his father. One of the novels is actually dedicated to, like, the central figure is definitely his father, Michele. So in 2011, Michele Ferrero travels to South Africa with his son Pietro. And his son Pietro really loved bicycles and cycling. He was 49. He had a heart attack and he died while he was on a bicycle ride in South Africa. So we talked about the faith of Ferrero. Certainly the funeral in 2011 in Alba was an expression of that faith. But there's a very famous anecdote where after the funeral, he didn't say anything, Michele, and he entered the factory, or the warehouse where Pietro had all his cycling gears, and he broke them all. So faith not as something that eliminates pain, but something that kind of explains it in a way. So after that, Giovanni became the CEO of the company, perhaps unwillingly, but like he's now the CEO of the company. Giovanni was the CEO of the company, and I think in 2018, I'm sure about the date, for the first time, he opened the company to someone not from within. So the CEO is now Lapo Civiletti. So he's the first non-Ferrero family person in the company. And so this is kind of like part of a transition of Ferrero. But the two sons kind of embody the two parts of the temperament of Michele, and they continue this today.
So what, now that Giovanni's in charge of the business, where is the business headed today? What's changed about the strategy, or what's new?
So the business is a family company, still family owned, and Maria Franca Fissolo, the widow of Ferrero Michele, is one of the wealthiest women in Italy. Despite Michele's attempt to keep the company kind of within itself, to not expand too much, Giovanni actually started moving the company toward it becoming a holding. So really, Ferrero acquired over the years a number of brands that are kind of Halloween kind of brands. So 100 Grand, Baby Ruth, Butterfinger, Fannie Mae, Raisinets. They're all part of Ferrero, apart from kind of the range of products that Ferrero itself developed. So now Ferrero is has about 47,000 employees, and it's in 135 different countries. And it has a net revenue about 17 billion euros. And the holding and Ferrero is kind of the third largest manufacturer of chocolate in the world. The holding is kind of a move to create in the chocolate world something like an aggregation of products, so a portfolio, which might be similar to what happens with fashion, LVMH, or Kering, which contain a range of products in different parts of the market. So it is going toward the direction of becoming a holding, more of an international holding, which is not the original intention of Ferrero, but to me, a company is like a story. It doesn't have to defend its purity. A story develops over the course of the years, and it might lead you to different places from where you started. So in general, I would say that there is more extra familiar contributions that are taking place now. So that's kind of where it's leading.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Luca. This was a incredibly interesting and educational podcast. I really appreciate you joining me. Where can my listeners learn more about your YouTube channel or your books or anything else?
Well, thank you for having me first. And I'm always happy to continue the conversation through the channel. My channel is called Italian Innovators. It's on YouTube. Podcasts are also available. And the webpage where I explain what the project is and my work is www.italianinnovators.com. And certainly you can find my book on Ferrero. If you read Italian, it's called Il Fabbricante di Cioccolato, so the chocolate maker. And the other books, The Art of Objects, is kind of the book on design and literature. Coming up in February, there's another book, academic book it's called The Rise of Americanism in Italy, on American soft power in the early 20th century, kind of dating the Americanization of Italy to the early 20th century. So J.P. Morgan, Buffalo Bill, Roosevelt, Wilson visiting Italy and exporting this American way of life. This will come out in about a month. So, and
yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, no, I'll definitely have to keep a lookout for that, and I'll include links for your channel and your book or your biography on Michele in the description below. So, all right, this is Beyond the Family Business Podcast. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Take care.